Presiding Officer, and it's a real pleasure to take part in this open debate this afternoon, tabled by Julie Morgan on an issue which seems increasingly in vogue at the moment, and that the public are becoming increasingly aware of, which is the wealth tax, which we're discussing today. The term wealth tax within itself is rather nebulous and can mean very many different things, but we can see from polling that without an explanation of what it would entail, the idea seems rather popular amongst the public, which reflects the dire economic state we're in and the desperation that many people feel. The definition of a wealth tax that is generally accepted is a tax imposed on an individual's net wealth or the market value of their total owned assets. Therefore, that's kind of wealth tax I'll be speaking about in this debate. We've seen, we now also seen both the Green Party and Plaid Cymru officially call for a wealth tax on assets over £10 million, in addition to some Labour Senedd members calling on the Chancellor to include it in the budget. This is a policy, I argue, that would be hugely damaging for our economy and will not lead to the desired effect. In fact, it would lead to the very opposite. And many experts agree with that notion. Even the Institute for Fiscal Studies warned that the UK is increasingly reliant on a relatively small number of taxpayers for a large share of revenue, and that these individuals are more internationally mobile and responsive to tax changes. Countries that have also attempted similar taxes live to regret it. France introduced a wealth tax with a rate charged on individuals ranging from 0.5% to 1.5% on assets over €10 million. The outcome was not a revenue boom, but a mass exodus of the very taxpayers it targeted. Between the year 2000 and 2016, 60,000 millionaires upped their sticks, with the tax contributing to just 2% of the tax receipts during its lifespan. With the French economist Eric Pichet estimating that the tax cost France twice as much. I'll just finish this point and then I'll give way. It cost France twice as much revenue as it generated, and in 2017, President Macron slashed it to revive growth. Jane.
So much. I just really wanted to echo the point that was made about France. It's clear that in terms of evidence that they set the bar too low, which actually then, as you quite rightly say, so I think Heledd actually did say comparing like with like is really, really difficult. So I just wondered if you could just reflect on that. And the second point, which again we've touched on here, is around the argument about people leaving the country. Patriotic millionaires are really clear. They will not leave. They want to stay and contribute. And surely those are the sorts of people that we want to remain in the UK, to contribute, but also to pay their fair share. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Well, I always think of, on that second point you made is, luckily enough, I wasn't around at the time, but, I always remember, reading a lot about, many celebrities that left the UK in the 1970s when the tax rate was 98p to the pound, likes of, Sean Connery, John Cleese, the Rolling Stones, you name it, they up sticks because, that was what they did. And we're starting to see evidence of that actually happening now, not to the profile of those superstars at the moment, but I think that's the I think it's it's about striking a balance in that sense and making sure that and actually the Exchequer loses more in tax revenue in that case because everybody's up in sticks and moving away. So those policies can actually be fairly damaging and counterproductive in that sense. Julie, yeah.
Yes, I just wondered if the member was aware of the survey that was done of people who were emigrating from the UK, which showed that the reasons given were lack of housing and low wages were the main reasons. It wasn't wealthy people, you know, the high taxpayers who were leaving, but it was people who were struggling here and were going to see if it would be easier somewhere else. So I just wondered if he was aware of this survey, the most recent survey.
I'm afraid I'm not aware of that survey, Julie, but you know, thanks for mentioning it. I will move on. Those on the left often scoff at the idea that wealthy individuals will simply move their wealth abroad, but that is exactly what happens. Since Labour entered office, a millionaire has left the UK every 45 minutes, and it's easy to restructure assets or relocate them to avoid taxes. More taxes, which we can expect in the Chancellor's budget, are simply going to accelerate the decline, and a wealth tax would be devastating. Amidst the drip-feeding of the budget spoilers by the UK Labour government, investment bank Rathbones revealed in a survey that the leaders of 12% of the UK's small and medium-sized enterprises, equivalent to the 680,000 businesses. Yes, I will, Mark. Yeah.
Do you share my concern that 10,800 millionaires left the UK last year, and that's forecast to rise to 16,800 this year?
Yeah, I mean that's a very stark figure, Mark, and yes, it's very worrying, and it goes back to the point that sometimes such ideas as a wealth tax can actually be counterproductive and not achieve the ambitions that the left try and set it out to be. Of the 680,000 businesses are planning to relocate themselves, their businesses are both due to the current tax burden. And even if you don't factor in capital flight and how collection of the tax would be a costly administrative nightmare, the amount of money a wealth tax is predicted to raise is small. The Green Party claims that I've took quite a few now, Jane. I need to move on. The Green Party claims that the wealth tax would raise between £15 and £25 billion per year, meaning an increase to UK government revenue of just 2%, and that is a best-case scenario. The combination of driving the wealthy overseas, huge cost and large administrative hurdles explain why most countries that introduced a wealth tax have ended up abolishing them. Only 4 countries in the OECD, a group of 38 mostly rich economies, levy one. Another important pitfall of a wealth tax is the difficulty in accurately valuing all of the wealth, especially illiquid assets like private companies or property, which was pointed out by Simon Harrington of the Personal Investment Management and Financial Advice Association. So the wealth tax crumbles under even the slightest of scrutiny. It wouldn't just be irresponsible to introduce one, it would be immoral and reflects a politics of envy. Perhaps the most immoral part of a wealth tax would be the tax on homes, but we should remember that we already have this, or at least a tax on the acquisition of homes. In fact, the UK already raises more from property taxation than any other OECD country. Stamp duty already operating as a form of wealth tax, as much as it does as an inhibitor of social mobility, which is why the Conservatives have pledged to scrap it. And on the issue of property, for those concerned about wealth inequality, building more houses is a much simpler way to address something both the Welsh and UK governments have failed to deliver on. Deputy Llywyd, a wealth tax is not a serious answer to the challenges Wales or the UK faces. John Baptiste Colbert, Louis XVI's Minister of 16th Minister of State, once said that the art of taxation lay in plucking the goose as to obtain the largest amount of feathers with the smallest amount of hiss. A wealth tax is akin to slaughtering the goose outright. It would weaken our economy base, drive away investment, and ultimately leave us with less revenue to fund public services that we all value. If the Labour Party are truly concerned about economic growth, as they repeatedly claim that they are, and as they are visibly failing to deliver, then they should dismiss this silly idea of a wealth tax out of hand. It's time to recognise that pursuing growth means encouraging wealth creation, not punishing it. Thank you very much.
Senedd Williams.
Dr Prylywydd, the calls for a wealth tax, I think, are